Hi everybody. In this video I'm going to show you how to use JavaScript and forms in HTML to create one of those sort of what blank are you? You know, what kind of this thing would you be? Sort of quizzes where you answer a few questions and it tells you, like, for example, like in my example, what Hogwarts house would you be in Harry Potter, or which character would you be in this show, or something like that. Those kinds of quizzes. So the logic of it is actually pretty straightforward and simple. So it'll be an opportunity to look at how if statements work in JavaScript, and also see an example of using a different type of form input. So the form input is radio buttons this time. So I'll answer the questions just to show you an example. What animal do you like the most? I guess badgers are cool, and I think you should do what is kind. Submit. It says I have 2 points for Hufflepuff, so I picked Hufflepuff answers. So I used an alert to just get a pop-up message that shows you what your scores were. If you want to extend this, you could very easily use the scores to pick some sort of content to display on the screen. That's up to you if you want to extend it that far. I'm just going to show you to get to this point. So let me show you how to do that. So first I'm going to set up the forms with the HTML. So I'll give this a heading. And you don't have to, in your example, you don't have to use Harry Potter, but I'm just using Harry Potter as an example. I'll create a form tag, close my form tag, and everything. All of the form items are going to go inside the form tag. I'll just use a paragraph tag to list one of the questions. And then my inputs. So the inputs will be grouped together in a group of 4 radio buttons. So I'll say input type equals radio. And then I'll need to give each individual input an ID so I can select it individually. So I'll say ID equals eagle. This one will be where you can select eagle. But then also I need to give it a name so that I can select the whole group later. So this is going to be like a group name. So this is a question about animals, so I'll call it animal. And all of the other ones in this category, like all this whole, all these 4 possible answers will all have the same name, so that they're grouped together and we can select them by name later. And then value, this is what the actual answer is that you select. So if you selected eagle, that represents Ravenclaw. So the actual value that's gonna be associated with it is Ravenclaw. And then a label. I'm going to say for. This is what ID this label is for, and that's eagle. And then I'll actually put the text eagle. And my label, and I'm just going to put a line break here because I know I'm going to need a line break. So you'll see if I run this, it shows a button with the word eagle. matched with the button. So what I'm actually going to do is just copy this, because I just need to, it's going to be the same thing 4 times. I just need to change a few things about each one. So for example, if I want the next answer to be snake, I would change this eagle. Snake. Animal stays the same because these are all grouped with animal, but snake goes with Slytherin. This would be snake. And I want the actual text to be snake. And I can do the same thing for lion and badger. And so here's my first question. And what I can do is copy this whole, really just copy this whole thing anytime I want to add a new question, because the structure of it will be the same, and I can just change the content. I'm going to add, this should be fine. Yeah, the structure of this will be the same. I just need to change the content. So instead of making the question about animals, this is about the motto of each house. So like, which motto do you agree with the most? And I just change the IDs of motto 1. I have to change the name this time to motto. And the values I can change, because I might want to change the order so it's not so obvious that, you know, if they're in the same order, it might become a little predictable with what house is associated with what question. So I'll have the motto for Gryffindor this time. And this will be for motto 1. And then I put the actual text in here. The motto for Gryffindor: do what is right. I'll just go through and change all these IDs to motto 2, motto 3, motto 4. Change all these animals to motto. And then I have to fill in the 4 IDs as well. So I believe I have motto 2, motto 3, motto 4. Then this one will be, I'll make this one Ravenclaw. I'll make this one Hufflepuff. And Slytherin. All right, so I've got my I've got most of my form set up. I just need to add a button. So outside of my form, button, on click, we're going to call a function called submit submit quiz instead of button. That's not what I wanted to do. Submit quiz. We didn't write this yet, so we're gonna have to write this, and that's what's going to process the information that you enter into the form. So when this button is clicked, it's going to run some JavaScript. So here's your form. There's a submit button. So now I've got to write script for what happens when you click the submit button. And we have to write that function. So function submit quiz. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create some variables to keep score. So as you're it's just kind of like keeping track of how many points you have for each Hogwarts house. So I'll say Gryffindor starts at 0, because they're all just going to start at 0. Slytherin 0. I'll start them all at 0, and then as you count how many of your answers line up with each house, you can add a point to the variable that's keeping track of the total for that house. And so there were 2 questions. If you had more questions, you could have more variables to keep track of the values selected. In those questions, you just duplicate this process. But what I'm going to do is for each question, document dot query selector. So a query selector, I spelled that wrong. Selector. Query selector is something that's built into JavaScript that allows you to go through a list of items and search for a condition. So these forms, and there are 4 items with the same name. So what we could do is we can search by name and then look for a name that has the pseudo class checked. Remember, pseudo classes from CSS. Well, we can use pseudo classes to select things in JavaScript as well. So what we'll do is select an input with, and then you put square braces here, with a name that equals animal, right? Think of that. This refers to, close this for a minute, but that refers to the name property here. Name equals animal for all the questions about an animal. So it's finding an input where the name equals animal. So we've got 4 inputs, right? An input element with the name animal that is also checked. Put a little colon here and mark it as checked, just like when you use pseudo classes, for example, :hover. Remember in CSS, when you want to specify that not just any link, but a link that's hovered over with the mouse, you would use :hover, that pseudo class. Well, you can use a similar style selector in JavaScript when you're using query selector to say, please, select the thing that is checked. So of all 4 of those inputs with the name animal, it's going to select the one that you clicked on because it'll be checked. Right? It'll be whichever one you check. See how it's the one that's marked. Notice that when you change within a group, it forces it to change. It doesn't let you select more than one. If they all have the same name, that's key. They all have to have the same name. it won't let you select more than one with the same name. I can select, these all have a different name, so I can select more stuff down here, but it won't let you select more than one with the same name. So that's why this works. It finds the one that's checked. All right, so and then what do I want from that? I want the value. So it'll either be Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, or Ravenclaw, because that is what we set up back in the HTML. If you select the first one, you selected the Ravenclaw answer, the second one, the Slytherin answer, the third one, whatever. It actually doesn't matter. That value, you don't have to keep track of what order they're in. Whichever one is checked, that value is what is stored, and that value is the value that's going to be found here and stored in this variable Q1 for question 1. So to summarize, the variable Q1 for question 1 is going to get a value it's going to be assigned a value. That's what this equal sign means. It's an assignment. It's going to store a value that you get from searching with a query selector for an input element with a name that's equal to animal and that is checked. And then it's going to get that element's value. That is what's going to be stored in the variable. So that's how that works. Now, if you want to use it again, it's simple enough to just copy it. Let's say question 2. Let's change the name to motto. And now we've got question 2's value as well. And now all we have to do, now that we've got the data, is use some if statements to figure out where the points should go. So if Q1 is equal to, it's a double equal sign, Gryffindor, then the variable Gryffindor is going to get 1 added to it. So what you could say is Gryffindor equals Gryffindor plus 1, because remember, we're talking about the value stored in the variable Gryffindor. That's this right here, this storage container for a number in this case. Gryffindor is holding, it's just keeping track of the score. Because the score for Gryffindor is 0. If you want to add 1 to Gryffindor, you would say Gryffindor equals Gryffindor plus 1. That just means, do 0 plus 1. Okay, it's 1 now. Well, there's a shortcut for this, and I usually use the shortcut, which is just say plus equals. So Gryffindor plus equals 1. That just means increase it by 1. So just want to point out a few additional things. So if statements, it's checking to see if some condition is true. So the condition goes in between the parentheses here. If the condition in between the parentheses is true, it runs the code that's in between the curly braces. So you've got curly braces here kind of bracketing the code that would run if it's true. If this isn't true, this doesn't run. So if question 1, if Q1, that variable here from where it looked up what value was selected, if that value isn't the string Gryffindor, because there are 4 different possibilities, it could be Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, or Ravenclaw. If this isn't true, if Q1 doesn't actually contain this text, this is not true. Another thing I want to point out is that there's a difference between this double equal sign and the single equal sign. Remember, earlier I said the single equal sign assigns a value to a variable. I tried to avoid saying equals. I might have used the word equals, but it's really an assignment. It's saying assign this data to this variable, whereas this is making a comparison. It's saying, is this variable actually equal to this text? It's asking a question. It's almost asking a true-false question, right? Is this equal to this, true or false? If it's true, this whole thing, this whole if statement is true, that means this code is going to run. If this statement is false, the code isn't going to run. That's inside the if statement. So we've got if Q1 equals Gryffindor, add 1 point to Gryffindor. Else if Q1 equals Slytherin, Slytherin plus equals 1. And I'm just going to do some copying and pasting here. And change this to Hufflepuff. Change this to Ravenclaw. Right? And this will take care of assigning a point for question 1. So if you want to do the same thing for question 2, it's as simple as just copying, pasting, changing the question number. Are there more elegant ways to handle this than just copying and pasting and changing the question number? Sure, but we don't need to get into that right now. It looks like I left off a quotation mark here, so don't forget to fix that if you made the same mistake that I made. So this one just applies to question 2. So now it's gonna assign points to the whichever answer was chosen for question 1. It's gonna assign points for whatever question or whatever answer was chosen for question 2. And assuming I didn't make any typos, this thing, oh wait, one last thing to do, and that is to sort of generate that message at the end, which I'll show you how to do it with an alert because it's just going to be quick, and I don't want to make this too complicated all at once. So alert is what causes that pop-up thing to drop down from the top of the screen. So alert, I'm just going to say Gryffindor :space plus the variable Gryffindor. And I'm just gonna, just to help make it easier to read, I'm gonna skip a line. The line break doesn't actually have an effect as far as how the code runs. I'm just putting it here to make it easier to read. And I'm gonna say \n for new line. That's gonna skip a line, so when it displays, it'll display the new text will display on a new line. So it'll be like each Hogwarts house will display its score on a new line. So I'll say hit Slytherin :space plus Slytherin and Ravenclaw. All right, so that should display the results at the end. Let's run it. See how it works. Stop my previous version. Okay, let's try again. All right, what happens if I choose Eagle? I'm gonna just the first 2. Submit. Nothing. Okay, what did I mess up? Most likely culprit is that my button just doesn't do anything. Let's see, I have a function called submit quiz. What did I call here? It says submit quiz. Okay. All right. We do some proper debugging and use Control-Shift-I. That'll bring up my developer tools. Let me look at the console. What does it say? Server responded. That's not helpful. OnClick with a C. Make sure you spell OnClick correctly. Don't mess up what I did. Let's try again. There we go. It looks like it's keeping score correctly because this is the motto for Gryffindor. This is the animal for Ravenclaw. Let me just change answers quickly. Snake and Slytherin. Am I a Slytherin? The sorting hat says yes. All right. Looks like we've got this working. So there's your Harry Potter sorting hat quiz.